Hello everybody, this is Dave here with another Rectify review, and today we are taking a look at the latest in superhero games, Marvel's Spider-Man. Spider-Man, one of the most popular and celebrated superheroes of all time, is no stranger to video games. In fact, Spider-Man's video game legacy is almost as long as his comic book career. Spider-Man was even the first Marvel comic hero turned into a video game, starring in the classic Atari 2600 game simply titled Spider-Man. As time went on, many different Spider-Man games have come and gone over the years. As varied and as popular as some of those games have become, it wasn't until Treyarch's Spider-Man 2 that somebody came close to capturing the most important part of the webbed hero, the actual web swinging itself. Spider-Man 2 at the time of its release in 2004 was a blessing and then later a curse. It revolutionized movement in the open world genre, and that was still a novel thing at the time. It was also the first game to really capture the feeling of playing a superhero. Up until that point, most superhero games were top-down action games, 2D side-scrolling beat-em-ups, or just terrible N64 games. Superman? Anybody? The problem with Spider-Man 2 isn't so much the game itself, but more of the shadow it had cast over every Spider-Man game that had followed ever since. Like I said before, many Spider-Man games have come and gone since that 2004 release. Some bad, some good, but nothing great. And none of them, no matter how well made they were, could match the sky-high expectations for fan base that loved Spider-Man 2's swinging. It was a thorn in the side of many a developer. You couldn't even dream of making a Spider-Man game without somebody on the internet screaming about the web swinging. It was a silly thing to worry about, but there was some truth to the complaints. Spider-Man is in large part the webs, swinging with them, and the freedom his movement gives him in traversal and combat is key to his character. Now let's fast forward the story to 2016. Marvel in of itself is a pop culture giant. Some would argue that Marvel is pop culture. Then Sony dropped a bomb at E3 when they announced they would be releasing a major exclusive Spider-Man game developed by the extremely talented team at Insomniac Games. Immediately the crowd went nuts, the internet exploded, and fans all over were right back to that very same question that has plagued developers the world over. How is the swinging? Is it like Spider-Man 2? Can you slingshot? How's the momentum? All of those same questions that every other developer could not seem to answer with their games over the years. But Insomniac was different from the rest. Right away, they embraced the comparisons and vowed to become the new standard for Spider-Man going forward. It's been 2 years since that initial announcement, but Marvel's Spider-Man is finally here, and the resounding answer to those questions is a loud yes. Thankfully, Insomniac didn't feel content with stopping at how good the swinging is, and made sure to craft a full experience worthy of the Spider-Man name. You see, the problem with that old Spider-Man game that everyone loves and has haunted developers for so long was that the game itself was simply just okay. The excellent traversal masked big problems with side content, its storyline, and combat. Insomniac has bigger plans, and they made sure to avoid the problems so many other Spider-Man games fail to realize. You need to do more than just make the swinging good to make a good Spider-Man game. For the most part, they pulled it off to perfection. Marvel's Spider-Man does away with any origin story, deciding to pick up with Peter Parker 8 years into his Spidey career. He has already locked away some of his greatest villains, dated and broken up with MJ, and is no longer working at the Daily Bugle. Sidestepping Peter Parker's origin story allows for a much deeper storyline to take shape. Instead of following any single comic story or film plot, Insomniac decided to take some of the best pieces of Spider-Man lore and weave their own unique story out of that legacy. And the story they tell goes deeper than just the cutscenes and dialogue between Peter and all of his friends and foes. They go beyond that, and they do something very important. They make New York City just as much a character as Spider-Man himself. For a long time in Spider-Man games, the city itself was merely there. Structures to be used as swing points and not much else. Insomniac truly goes above and beyond with its environmental storytelling. Do yourself a favor and walk in the streets for a bit. Everything on the ground is dense and hyper-detailed. NPCs fully react to Spidey and his heroics. They will laugh with you, cheer you on, and some will obviously give you crap for making a mess. It's the small details, but those are the ones that go very far in selling you on the rest of the world that this story takes place in. You see, that's important because Spider-Man, more than Batman, Superman, or almost any other hero, is a hero for the people. He is rooted and grounded in a way that the more fantastical characters could never be. That's a very integral piece of what makes Spider-Man a hero and Peter Parker a man. Marvel's Spider-Man kicks off its story with Kingpin being arrested and a flashy opening mission worthy of any Spider-Man film. With Wilson Fisk gone, the streets are seemingly cleared up, and you can go about your Spidey business. The world then opens up to the player and presents opportunities all across New York. Side missions range from hacking police towers, finding random backpacks that Spider-Man has kept webbed up around town, and research stations his good friend Harry Osborn set up to help clean and protect the environment. Now, for the first few hours, I was really thinking these seemingly simple and mundane side quests were going to be a problem for me. There are times when you are literally swinging through clouds of pollution, or jumping off buildings to test algae samples, and those aren't exactly thrilling Spider-Man moments. A side quest to chase and catch pigeons hidden throughout the city were giving me serious red balloon fetch quest flashbacks, and I was ready to drop them entirely and spend this whole review questioning this trivial mission design for all of the side content. However, this is where part of the environmental storytelling comes into play. You see, in many open world games, not just the superhero ones, the story being told in the cutscenes is very different than the story the world is telling the player when you are just roaming around in the city. Think of how many games you have played where the stakes are high, the world is ending, but as soon as you gain control of your character, everything is the same as it was when you started the game. As the main plot runs its course throughout the playtime, the consequences of character actions really resonate and have a deep impact on not just Spider-Man and his allies, but the city itself. Everything at some point takes a darker turn, and even the side quest content ramps up according to the danger the main plot is presenting. You go from stopping simple alleyway muggings to silently defeating enemies before bombs are strapped to civilians and detonate. Instead of chasing pigeons and collecting them, you may have to run around to find and disarm bombs planted to cause massive destruction and civilian casualties. The ante is raised all around Spider-Man, and the intensity of the story running its course has clear ramifications for Spider-Man, his allies, and New York itself. Now, of course, all of the greatest cutscenes and environmental storytelling wouldn't matter much if the actual playing wasn't up to the challenge. This is where the expertise Insomniac brings to the table gets to really shine. From the very moment you have control, the web swinging is immediately natural and fluid. Each new web he shoots, the way he pulls on it to swing and gain momentum, and the responsiveness you have over his movement is second to none. The fluidity of every single animation during a single swing is impressive. Different dismounts all lead to tons of different animations based on when you decide to jump or let go of your swinging. Running into buildings or landing on the ground also don't bring the action to a halt. They have given Spider-Man fantastic transitions from swinging, wall running, and even turning corners while on said buildings. it just feels great. The swinging and traversal is so good that by the time you unlock fast travel, you will hardly have a need for it. This is key because despite how mundane most of the early side quests are, they are still fun to actually do because they all require a mastery of your expanded set of traversal abilities. Even better is how the movement flows with the combat as well. Using a blend of mechanics from older Spider-Man games and Rocksteady's excellent Arkham titles, instead of traditional counters, however, like in Batman, you get to use your spider sense to dodge incoming attacks. At first, the system can take some time to get comfortable, but between your extended playtime and the various upgrades you earn while leveling up, you'll feel right at home with the combat. The best part of the combat is the simple fact they never strip away your sense of freedom and mobility. See, many previous Spider-Man games feel like two different games in one. There is the one part where you're using your movement and your wall crawling, and there is the second, which whenever a fight breaks out, a lot of the older games would force invisible walls or ground Spidey and force him into a very limited and stifling combat style. Insomniac wisely sidesteps that problem entirely and never takes control away from the player at any moment. You can go from a ground combo, transition into an air launcher, dodge a rocket with the well-timed web zip, all seamlessly with no buffer between any of these actions. It all adds up to some of the most dynamic and entertaining action spectacles of any open world game ever, let alone just the Spider-Man games. I'd also be a fool to not mention some of the obvious. If you just take a second to take any kind of glance at this game, the visuals are spectacular. They really did a great job of bringing Spider-Man to life. Every suit, the animations, you pause it and you go to photo mode. It's just detail everywhere. Every part of his character, his fighting, the city you're in, the day and night cycle, the way light reflects, the way the music swells when you start your swinging, all of the audio and visual treatments they give this world are second to none, and combined with the environmental storytelling and how they present combat and the swinging to you, really come together to sell a very cohesive package and one of the best looking games I've played in a long time. But as much as I loved my time with this new iteration of everybody's favorite webbed hero, I did have some issues. Throughout the story, they throw a lot at the player, and not all of it sticks. Peppered in the storyline are various stealth sequences where you play as other characters than Spider-Man. While I appreciate the attempt at changing the pace for a little bit, the main issue I have with these moments is how mundane they are to play through. They are long, but never difficult, and they are extremely forgiving. If they stripped control from the player and turned these 15-minute stealth levels into 3-minute cutscenes, I feel like nothing of importance would be lost. They also feel fit to throw more hacking sequences than BioShock and the Mass Effect series combined in a very asinine way to demonstrate that Peter Parker is a, quote, genius. They consist of 2 to 3 very simple puzzles that only serve to provide a platform for Peter to say very long words to showcase how smart he is. Overall, these hacking moments are nothing more than a mild annoyance. Insomniac even added a feature that allows you to simply skip all of the puzzle sequences entirely. But the question must be asked, if you felt the need to give players an option to skip the puzzles, then why bother including the puzzles at all? Forced stealth sequences and bad puzzle minigames aside, they don't come close to taking away or tarnishing the feat that Insomniac Games pulled off with Marvel's Spider-Man. They broke the curse of Spider-Man 2. They tell a fully realized and complete story that doesn't rely on Marvel cameos and crossover appearances to get you invested and excited in its world. Most importantly is they didn't just make a great Spider-Man game, they made a great video game, period. 9.5 out of 10, Marvel Spider-Man is right up there with God of War as some of my favorite experiences in 2018 for all of video gaming. Check out the written review at rectifygaming.com. My name is Dave. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe. It goes a long way to helping us out, and have a good one.